Hello and welcome back to the Expo Factor. I'm your host Lee, and today's episode is all about building the kind of booth team that doesn't just show up but shows off your brand in the best possible light and has fun doing it as well. We're joined by the brilliant Deanna Krause, a marketing powerhouse who's exhibited at over 3,000 trade shows and evaluated more than 1,000 stands. She's here to share her frontline insights on what separates the average from the outstanding when it comes to team performance on the show floor. If you're an exhibit planner, event marketer, or just someone looking to turn booth chaos into consistent results, then this episode is for you. Let's get into it and say hello to Deanna. Hi, Deanna. Welcome to the Expo Factor.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we haven't seen each other for a while. I think the last time we saw each other was at Exhibitor Live last year, wasn't it? Was it Nashville?
I actually don't remember now that it switches locations, but I love going every year, and it's always good to see you there. We usually present, sometimes we don't, but it's awesome to see you there.
Likewise. So welcome to the Expo Factor. And my first question to my guests is always, how did you end up in the exhibition industry? What's your story? And tell us a bit more about your career. And I believe you've managed or attended about 3,000 exhibitions. Is that correct?
That is correct. So is the number one answer you get, I ended up here by accident, or no? Is it? Because that's actually how I ended
Number
up.
one answer is nobody has actually said so far that they've actually wanted a career in exhibitions.
Yeah, I probably in college, I didn't even know that there was a career in trade shows and events. Maybe I just didn't think it totally through when I went into marketing. But I was working at a smaller company that did liquid crystal displays, and our event person left. And when she left, they had one of their biggest trade shows of the year coming up. And they sat on it for about a month and didn't do anything. And then they said, hey, Deanna, you're doing market research. How about you just do our events as well? And I knew nothing, like literally nothing. And so that was back when we had the big show kits, like they came in the binder, right? And so I read the binder page by page by page. And I remember telling somebody, I'm like, oh, why would we order carpet pad? What a waste of money. Like that's how little I knew about being in a trade show. Anyways, I ended in it by accident. And then once I did my first trade show, I was kind of bitten by the bug, but I want to say it was probably a little bit more. I happened to be able to go to Exhibitor Live that year, going in. So having done one of the biggest trade shows of the year and really being only focused on logistics, because that was all that was in the show kit that was given me. I had no training, to going to a show where they talk about staffing, when they talk about measurement, when they talk about how to be more strategic in your exhibit. That's when I really got bitten by the bug, because you not only get to be creative, but you get to be very analytical as well. So that's why I ended up doing it. And then I've stated that was 1998 that I went to my first exhibitor and started in trade shows. So it was a long, long time ago.
Oh, wow. 1998. I can't even remember what I was doing back then. I think I was selling, I was actually selling door to door. I was selling cable TV and telephone door to door. Back then.
Well, one day I'm going to have to hear your story of how that changed into going into the exhibit industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So was it a personal motivation for you to want to be educated about how exhibitions are actually managed, or were you sent by the company?
Personal. So I asked to be sent. I happened to get a piece of direct mail and saw it and wanted to go. I tend to be a lifelong learner. Like anything that comes up that's new, I want to dive into and learn about. So that was what appealed to me about it. And it really helped, because after that, I went one time with that company to Exhibitor. Then I came to San Diego and started working for a division of the Home Depot at the time. And that went from, where I was managing, 20, 30 trade shows a year, to moving to a company where we had over 300 trade shows at the time when I started. And so I was managing a team there, which is why there's quite a large number of trade shows on my resume. But then I started going back to Exhibitor really regularly, got my CTSM, silver, gold, bronze, and now I'm a diamond. So, but it's been, and now I consult privately for companies. So whether it's a large booth that they need help with, they need help just evaluating their program, or they just need fractional services while they're trying to fill a role or somebody's on a maternity leave, is what I do. But it's given me a really unique perspective on it, right? Because I started in high tech, and then I went to, maintenance and repair products. And now I work in domain management and I work for medical technology. And so it's kind of been all over the board,
Yeah.
but it gives me a
Yeah.
good perspective. You know, especially I used to review booths. I think you might have mentioned that. I would go in and
Yeah.
give people feedback on the show floor. Man, you just,
Yeah.
you see people, everybody has a very different approach to exhibit marketing. And so being able to
Yeah.
have that breadth and look across all those different companies, I think has really fascinated me and helped me learn quite a bit.
Oh, wow. So you've now reached diamond level on the CTSM certification. I think you're one of quite a few, very few individuals actually who've got to that stage. What did it actually mean to you to actually achieve that?
I had been working for it for quite a while. The requirements recently changed. They took away a few things that you had to do, but it really was
Yeah.
about giving back to the industry. So that's how I started speaking at Exhibitor. Was I wanted to get my
Yeah.
diamond. I think I started speaking in, gosh, 2006, 2008, 2010, something like that. So quite a while ago is when
Yeah.
I started speaking there. So that's why I did it. But then you also have to do things like mentor people on their portfolio. So you actually have to get, at the time, you had to
Yeah.
get 5 people certified on top of that,
Yeah.
advising them how to get through the whole process. You had to, what else did we have to do? Sometimes we had to volunteer, do local events. I taught a power portfolio weekend. So it's really fun to see people that are, younger in their careers and help them to learn through, because I think a lot of people start as just focused on logistics like I did. Like that's the
Yeah.
first thing that
Yeah.
pops up because you have to be able to manage those deadlines, and then see people have that moment where like, oh my gosh, look at all the things I can do with this. How can I be a needle mover? And I think
Yeah.
that's been a really beneficial part of my time and experience, because I love seeing that light bulb moment when people are like, I can do that. So
Yeah. Well, that's the unique experience and perspective that we want to tap into today, Deanna. So, the subject of today's podcast is all about building high performance teams, especially booth staffing teams, because, 80, was it 85, 86% of the exhibitor success is all down to the people on the booth. You've obviously, across all these shows that you've done over the years, you've probably noticed a lot of themes or recurring themes about high performing exhibitors and very poor performing exhibitors. So what would you say is the difference between those two perspectives?
So I have seen quite a few interesting things. I'll tell you one really quick story because it so baffled me. I was assigned as a booth evaluator. So I was literally
Yeah.
wearing a shirt that said booth
Yeah.
evaluator. The company
Yeah.
that I was going to, the companies I was going to, knew I was coming. They'd actually either paid for this service or it was part of a package they had done. And I would normally kind of show up to the booth, make some notes, evaluate the booth, and then go over and then, hey, here's a few things you could change on the show floor, whatever, right? So they knew
Yeah.
I was coming, and I walked up to this one booth. I did my whole evaluation, which is not a short evaluation. It was like 36 questions, 3 different pictures. I was there for a few minutes. And the
Yeah.
person who was staffing the booth was literally sitting down at their table working on their computer the entire time. Never once looked up at me, never once looked at anybody else walking by, nothing. So I walked up and I stood right in front of him. I didn't say anything, but I stood right in front of the table, still did not look up and talk to me. Like it was, why are you even there? You know what I mean? Like that is that's a very expensive workplace for the day. You're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
do anything else, because attendees are, you have to have something to break the ice. You have to have a way to
Yeah.
start that engagement, start that conversation. And if you're just sitting there, somebody 99% of the times, nobody's going to come up and tap you on the shoulder and say, excuse me, sorry to bother you, but I have a question about your products and services that
Yeah.
I'm really interested in buying. So
Yeah.
that was baffling to me. So I think making sure that you're selecting staff that want to
Yeah.
be there,
Yeah.
and I guess if you can't select the staff and they don't want to be there, giving some examples or talking to them about how important it is that they are engaging and are trying to look for signals in people as they're walking by, or start conversations with people to bring them into the booth. And that is the simplest thing, whether you're in a 10 by 10 or whether you're in a
Yeah.
100 by 100.
Oh, absolutely. So when you're planning, as an exhibit planner, when you're planning for a large trade show strategy, like for example, over 300 shows, how challenging is it to put together a large scale team in different cities, people that you might not know. How do you actually go about that process of actually selecting? Because for me, when we work with clients, when we ask the question, who's coming, who's part of your team, and how have you actually selected them? The most common answer that we get, because they were the only people available
Oh,
or willing
really?
to come to the exit.
Yeah, I will say it's dictated a lot of times, right? Like a lot of times
Yeah,
it's not like I'm like, hey, I think Joe, Susie, and Bobby should go, right? It's a
yeah,
lot of times like, hey, we want our West Coast sales team there, plus our VP of sales, plus our whatever. So it tends to
yeah,
typically be very sales driven and based on, for me, based on kind of what their role is in the company. And then sometimes it goes outside of that, like product managers or experts or different things like that. But 99% of the times when I'm working with a company or I've worked at a company, it's been sales driven. And so then my
right.
challenge becomes either how do I, and Lee, you always do a great job with this, of talking about how do I match that person's personality to what they're doing in the booth if it's a bigger booth.
Yeah,
Or what I've had to do in the past is find ways to motivate staff to be better in the booth if
yeah,
they don't want to be there. Or I've also tried, like, sometimes you just have people come in and they're just really excited about being there. Like competition can really excite people. And so
yeah,
sometimes, and some people are naturally motivated. Like I remember one time we were doing tours is the wrong word, but we were doing like little excursions through our booth. And depending on what you knew about our company and what you wanted to learn, you could kind of go through and do this little game in our booth, right? And I had one staffer that it wasn't even a competition. And he was so excited to be like the number one staffer. He was like signing all of his cards, so proud of how much all of his people in them. So I was able to use him as an example for the following year to our sales
yeah,
leadership and say, look at the difference when you have, I think his name was Walt. But when you have Walt in the booth compared to when you have Joe, I'm just making up that name. But when you have Walt in the booth, look at the difference in results we get because of how
yeah,
motivated he was to be there. And so that's let
yeah.
me have a little bit of an impact on who's staffing, even if I don't have the say up front.
So when you've dealt with the sales departments, there is one unpopular or popular form of opinion that says that you should leave salespeople behind, that you should not even take them on the booth. What's your viewpoint on that?
Some of it is going to depend on your product, right? Like I've never
Yeah,
been to a trade show where a salesperson isn't there. Some of them are
yeah,
excellent. So I think if
yeah,
you said you should never bring a salesperson, you would be missing out because there are some people
yeah,
that are really fantastic. It's a different skill set selling on the show floor
yeah,
or engaging on a show floor than it is in the
yeah,
field. But I think you would be
yeah,
missing out potentially if you didn't have any sales staff there.
yeah,
But I think one of the things that people sometimes look over is also bringing in your technical experts. So
yeah,
one time we used to measure awareness a lot at one of the companies
yeah,
I went to, and it was very
yeah,
specific. How much awareness did I generate about this one particular product? And so one
yeah,
year we were talking about our renovation services, and at this particular show, it jumped up. Our conversion index, so on that particular message, was really high. And so
yeah,
we ended up diving into it and we found out it was very simple. Instead of having a salesperson staff that area, we had a renovations expert staff that area. And that passion and that deeper knowledge translated well to that audience who was highly interested in that subject.
yeah,
So I would never throw the baby out with the bathwater and say I've had a few bad
yeah,
salespeople staff the booth, so I'm going to throw them all out. But
yeah,
also sometimes they're not very comfortable doing that initial engagement and bringing people into the booth. So sometimes you either
yeah,
need to find the right personality match or you need to find the right staff that is really good at engaging that pass by audience. Because, Lee, you talk about this a lot too, but it's hard to
yeah,
hear no time after time after
yeah,
time again and still keep that positive, upbeat, fresh, appeal to people throughout
yeah.
4 hours in a day, 8 hours in a day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always say, I mean, we do a joint presentation together, and the key thing is to map out before you select the people. I always feel that it's always best to map out your customer journey. Okay, so really look at the booth, how you're actually going to engage people at the front end. and who are the right people to stand at the front of the booth and bring people in. So break the ice with them, ask the qualification questions, and then have another stage, obviously, for your product demonstrations or the next step, whether it's an activation or spin the wheel or whatever it is that you want to have the attendees do, and actually have a different type of personality doing that. Especially like you said, with the technical teams, they're really good at the demonstrations, okay, because they can answer all of the technical questions. They know everything in depth about the product, and they can also, give a unique perspective on the product. So, and then obviously, if you're doing hospitality, then you need people who are very good at making people feel welcome and making sure that the logistics are done, the tea and coffee is served on time, and making sure that everything is neat and tidy. So it's really I hate using this, but horses for courses, as the old saying goes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that
So
people
yeah,
love that in the class when you talk about that and the quiz you
yeah.
give to kind of like identify what type of personality people are. And so, yeah, I think people really can start to see that better as you talk through that.
Yeah, yeah. To use the analogy, I mean, if you look at all the best performing sports teams, for example, they all have specialists in their positions. So if you take an American football team, for example, they'll have linebackers, they'll have defense, they'll have forwards, and they practice being that good in their position, and everyone contributes. And I guess building a high performance booth team is no different, because you need someone who's really good at engaging people. You need someone who's really good at understanding the product, and you need someone who's really good at managing the team as well. So I think those, for me, are real critical positions to actually fill. I mean, what experience do you have in terms of, have there been situations where you've thought, hang on, this person, they're actually at the front of the booth and they're actually making a huge exhibit of themselves and actually costing them company a lot of money in terms of not doing the right type of engagement because they're not skilled at it?
Yeah. Yeah. We've all had that. Let me add one thing before I answer that question. The other thing that
Yeah,
came to mind as you were speaking is
yeah,
also a little bit of it depends on your audience. So, for
yeah,
example, with
yeah,
the medical technology company, you have a lot of scientists come in. They might not want to talk to somebody who doesn't have that deep of a level of understanding. So,
yeah,
I think you have to look at your audience too in determining that booth staff. So that was just a wrinkle I didn't always understand until I went into some shows that I, as a marketing person, or as if I was a greeter, I would never be able to talk to a
yeah,
scientist about mass spectrometry,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah,
and that was
yeah.
one. And then you just asked me about, bad behavior. Has anybody kind of put on a bad front and we're worried about losing money? I don't typically go to every single small show we've done. So that
Okay.
example I gave before was one I observed, but I did have one time where, and we were doing a lot of shows at Home Depot. But one time we found out the guy just set up the booth and left because we actually had an attendee email us and say that they were interested in more information and they had stopped by our booth multiple times. So
Right.
that was whatever it was at the time, $10,000 worth of money that we had invested in. And just by not even showing up, even though it's the most basic of examples. But in a bigger booth, I think here's a good example. So we were at the International Hotel Motel Restaurant Show, and I had somebody who was assigned to do kind of like interactives or demos in each area. But my greeters had and the greeters then would greet people, kind of get them pulled into the booth, and then their job was to hand them off to somebody. For whatever reason, multiple times at that show, and it was an island booth, but for multiple times at that show, somebody would be wandering through the middle of the booth looking at a product, like you could tell they were interested and had a question. And then I would walk over, and I don't know anything about our product. I mean, I know a little bit, but I don't know enough
Yeah,
to like really sell our products, right?
yeah,
So at that show, there was two examples. One person wanted to buy 400 TVs and another person wanted to buy 20,000 feet worth of baseboard, right? And I
yeah.
was the one that ended up engaging both of those people because our greeters weren't doing the job of then introducing them to the next person.
Right.
So it's really
Oh wow.
important not only that you pick the right person for each role in your
Yeah,
booth, but also that you have a way for evaluating if they're doing the right
yeah,
things within the booth, whether
yeah,
it's you
yeah.
monitoring it or somebody else monitoring it, kind of tying back to that coach role that you talked about before.
So as an exhibit planner, when you are planning the show, how far in advance do you normally or would you suggest that people start looking at the team? Is it alongside the booth, or is it 4 to 6 weeks before the event? Where on the map of that planning journey is best suited to actually select people?
Yeah. Some of it for me depends on the booth size, right? The larger the booth, the earlier I start planning. And I have found that if I don't, it used to be like for a big booth, you would plan it with your core planning team, and then your staff would come at the end, and then you would kind of do your staff training and off you would go, right? And what I had
Yeah,
found was that there was really good insight from some of the staff that were going to be in the booth. Not surprising, right?
yeah,
20 brains are better than one. You just have to figure out how to make sure you're guiding the process versus other people. So for large booths, I typically bring people in earlier now. So if we start planning a large
yeah,
booth 6 months out, probably about the 4 month mark, I'll do at least some sort of overview where we're going. So there's still time to pivot if needed based on feedback that they
yeah,
give. And then they're not in every planning meeting, but then we bring them in later. For the
yeah,
small
yeah,
shows, I don't have typically as much impact on picking who's
yeah,
staffing. I typically there's more people that want to go than can go a lot of
yeah,
times. It's
yeah.
very much
Of course,
regional
yeah,
based, and then who's our technical expert or our business development person or somebody else who's going to go to the show. So I typically
yeah,
probably about 2 months out talk to them,
yeah.
and then I do my staff training before the show. So fewer touch points than the full planning team, but it really depends on show size.
Okay, great. And how far in advance would you recommend in terms of briefing people or training them? So do you do on-site training, or do you prefer to do off-site training before they get on the show floor?
Yeah, but kind of both. So
Right.
for the big shows, we typically do like 4 months before we do the initial, here's an overview of the booth, blah, 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 blah. As we get closer to the show, we do a here's everything you need to know about the show, but also here's some key
Yeah,
things in terms of training that you need to know. But
yeah,
if I'm going to a big show, I always do an in person training as well. And because I think
yeah,
it's really important, especially when you have, I typically have more assigned roles in my bigger booths. If
yeah,
I'm in a 10 by 10, it's kind of everybody's
yeah,
doing multiple
yeah,
roles. And they might have a
yeah,
primary role, but you got to fill in as you start
yeah,
talking to people. You just don't have enough. But the big booths, when I have assigned roles, getting on show site and giving them time to practice. Here's
yeah,
how I would engage somebody off the show floor. Here's the hook I would use. Here's what I would say. Here's how I would
yeah,
walk and hand them up. So not only walking them through every single role on the show floor, but giving them that practice time makes a huge difference. And it was something, I know
yeah,
it sounds so simple, but it was something I missed early in my career. I was like, they're
yeah,
salespeople. They know how to sell. They're going to come on the show floor. They're
yeah,
going to be great. And they got really
yeah,
nervous. And it wasn't until I
yeah,
physically saw their reaction and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to actually tell them how to do this on the show floor. And it sounds kind of silly, but I think a lot of what I learned by
yeah,
making mistakes and having to improve it.
yeah,
And then the
yeah,
one other like little tip I'll make is, and it might not apply to everybody, but back when we used to measure awareness of different messages, one of the shows we had a much higher rate across everything. So we called it the conversion rate. It was a much higher conversion rate across everything. And we were like, what did
yeah,
we do different at that show? We had 22,000 products. The sales team didn't know, it would be difficult to know. So we had sent out a
yeah,
training manual just for them to study and then quizzed them on it prior. And they got like a
yeah,
bonus. They got some money if they did it. And that show, just because we gave them that information in advance and gave them more time to study it, in addition to our other trainings, we had a much
yeah.
higher generation of results for that.
Fantastic. I mean, that's a common mistake that we see across the board, isn't it? People expect people that are actually going to the trade show to actually know everything, to be great mind readers, and actually expect, and a lot of the time I see when I walk the show floor, I just see unprepared people who are told to stand there, just welcome people, and they're not actually aware of what the greater goal is of the company or why they're actually there in the first place. So I think having that preparation plan before the event, during the event, before the event starts, and then also during the event, and constantly monitoring and giving people feedback as to how they're doing, or being able to change the approach as well. Because if, for example, you've trained someone and you've set up a very specific strategy to engage people and take them on that journey, and by the end of the morning, it doesn't work. So do you continue doing the same thing, or do you actually, stop, gather the team together and then say, right, okay, guys, this is not working. So how do you actually approach that kind of misfire, if you like?
Yeah. So during the day, a lot of times I'll do small pivots, right? So a small
Yeah,
pivot might be
yeah,
somebody's not engaging well and bringing people into the booth. So I might ask one of the executives to come over and help that person, right? Because as soon as their boss
yeah,
shows up, they're going to behave a lot better, even though that's not the
yeah,
best way to do it, but it helps because then it's bringing people in. That's if you can get the boss to do the right thing and not misbehave,
yeah,
right? Because sometimes they're detracting
yeah,
matters. But typically, so I'll do small things like that, or like, hey, can you make sure that you do X, Y, and Z? And like the awareness thing, and I'll stop talking about it after this. I just happen to have a lot of examples. You had to do a pre-survey and a post-survey when they came into the booth, and for whatever reason, even
yeah,
though we'd talked about it multiple times, they have to do both. People at the welcome desk were tearing them in half and only having them do one survey, which
yeah,
invalidates all the results. Like it doesn't make it work the way we were measuring it. So if I had not
yeah,
been monitoring that throughout the day, monitoring those
yeah,
results, I wouldn't have caught that. But
yeah,
typically, where my biggest changes are made are at the end of the day. We do a daily debrief at the end of the day. Some people do them the
yeah,
morning of the next day. I personally like to do them at the end of the day because there might
yeah,
be something that I have to create a new sign for or change something in the
yeah,
booth. So I like to be able to do it at the end of the
yeah,
day where I have time to pivot. And those
yeah,
debriefs aren't just me saying, here's what I observed and things I think we should change the next day. It's asking them what was working well in your role. What do you need to do better in your
yeah,
role? It's asking them. You will get great insights from the people that are doing those jobs on the show floor. So I
yeah.
never miss a daily debrief on the show floor.
Oh, fantastic. That's great advice. And in terms of getting people engaged and giving them energy, I think if people feel as part of a team, they tend to perform better. Do you agree?
100%. I think that's one of the founding pillars for our presentation that we do, right? Really talking
Yeah,
about because I think commonly the way it's viewed is when we set up a competition, set up a competition
yeah,
in the booth, that it's one
yeah,
staffer against another staffer. And
yeah,
one of the things that we talk a lot about in the presentation is it's actually better to have them motivate as a team because if
yeah,
you I think the example I give in the class is basketball, right? Like if I'm in a slam
yeah,
dunk
yeah,
competition and I'm competing against you, I'm going to do anything I can to win. I'm going to steal the ball from
yeah,
you. I might throw it to the sideline. I'm working against you when we're pitted against one each other. So it's not
yeah,
just
yeah,
the whole thing's going to rise. It's almost going to be like if I go up, you might go down a little bit. Whereas if we set
yeah,
team goals and have them buy into their own goals, set their own goals, so that ties into our bigger picture team goal, they'll kind of self regulate or monitor one another, pitch in when they're
yeah,
needed. There's a lot of benefits in terms of setting team goals to make a better whole than if you pit them against one
yeah,
another.
yeah. I mean, you can see this manifesting on the show floor, can't you? When individuals are in competition, they will actually try to take over conversations, right? Where one booth staffer is actually talking to someone, and Steve, the superstar salesman, he will try to interject into maybe junior colleagues' conversations because he has that competition in mind to win. So I see that quite a lot. So, and it really stops that kind of behavior then, doesn't it? So it's becoming much more supportive rather than trying to interject and try to take over that potential sales lead.
Yeah. And if you do have that competition and that example you just gave, super salesperson against the
Yeah,
new guy, it's not
yeah,
just that you're kind of losing in terms of numbers, one versus the other. Think of the impact
yeah.
on the customer, right? It makes cut,
Oh,
they
yeah,
can sense
yeah,
it, prospects can sense it, it
yeah,
makes them uncomfortable in it. And that's an invisible loss that you won't see because a lot of times
yeah,
it's their first impression of your brand and your company. And if it's
yeah,
not your
yeah,
best foot forward at a trade show, all of your
yeah,
competitors are typically right there. They're going to walk over there. And if they have a better experience, better morale, just a better overall
yeah.
brand experience, they're going to go to that company.
Yeah, as I always say, I mean, people create energy, positive energy, and if there is a kind of negative atmosphere between the team members, people will actually, the attendees actually feel that, don't they? I mean, they kind of run a mile to that. I don't want to go to that booth. There's something wrong there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. It's that
wonderful.
gut feeling
Uh,
like, oh, there's ickiness at that. Like, yeah. Yeah.
All right. And then, in terms of really measuring the performance, I know in our presentations you talk about three different things about how you can actually, what we actually observe in the booth staff performance and how do we actually improve that performance for the next show. So, talk us through some of the key points that you look at in terms of how to support staff get better at their job, and what are the two or three things that you really look at that we as exhibitors can actually fine tune and actually look at improving for the future shows.
Yeah. I think that one of the things you can look at is how much of the, and there's tools that'll help you with this now, which makes it a lot better back in the day when we were kind of
Yeah,
manually counting everything.
yeah,
But what percentage of the pass by audience are you pulling in, right? So am I getting 10% of the audience? Am I getting 20% of the audience? Or at least am I trying to engage with, right? Because that tells you if your exhibit
yeah,
staff is doing the right thing. If you don't have a broad appeal, that might not be the most relevant metric because you might be very niche. So it might be then, okay, let's
yeah,
look at those people that somehow visually engaged with my booth. Did they pause for a second? Did they read a message? Okay, of those, how many people am I bringing in my booth? So, and like I said, there's great technology for that nowadays. If you can't afford
yeah,
the technology, you can still go back to you as the coach are monitoring the behavior. And I'm clicking on one hand, how many people are
yeah,
looking? I'm clicking on the other, how many times they were talked to or engaged with, right? So that's a simple
yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah,
Then we also like to look at of those people that are brought into the booth, how many of those are actually scanned, asked the qualifying questions. Qualifying questions, just even
yeah,
asking them or not asking them is a really important metric in my point of view. Because otherwise,
yeah,
after the show, you have a list of names. If you don't have any of that qualifying data, here's what the notes were. So
yeah,
I always set that as a metric of at least whatever 80% of the leads have to have those questions answered. 90%, I called them leads, but they're actually contacts. 90% of the contacts we made the show are have the qualifying questions asked. Because otherwise people are like scan happy and then you get a number, but it's not a meaningful number because nobody, the attendee or the prospect included, doesn't want to get a phone call after the show saying, hey, you saw us at the IHMRS show. What can I help you with? Right? Like it's awkward. It's awkward for the salesperson. It's awkward for the attendee. So that's, I think, a really important metric. And it also tells you whether people are doing their job at the show. And even if it's not a big show, if
yeah,
it's a show that just my staff is at and it's a 10 by 10, that's something I can easily monitor through our lead capture, right? So if I have a lead capture
yeah,
system, I can go in
yeah,
and see how many people are meeting that. So those are the two of the
yeah,
things that I typically always look at.
yeah. One thing I see again when we actually hire our teams, a lot of exhibitors come to us and say, "We want your team to scan as many badges as possible," and that puts us in a really difficult position. Obviously, we want to obviously service the client and make sure they get what they want, but at the same time, it's a principle that you just said. If you just have a badge scan and you've got no other data, what's the point?
Yeah.
You might as well get a list of 2,000 names from LinkedIn and just uh, cold email them. It's the same principle. So it's I think, I mean, I asked my last guest, Adam Parry, who runs a show called Event Tech Live. Do you think that the onset of event technology has made us lazier in terms of engaging people? Is it a hindrance or is it like an aid to help us do better as exhibitors?
That is a good question. I personally don't think it has made us lazier. Um, but it could
Yeah,
be kind of what tech you're using. It could be how you're monitoring it. So,
yeah,
if you just put up some sort of interactive and people are going to use the touch screen to do something and you're not, making sure that you're tying it together, which I'll talk about separately in a minute, then it's made you lazier, right? Because you're not doing
yeah,
anything. And here's one interesting thing I will say. In terms of like digital interactives versus physical interactives, I get better
yeah,
results with physical interactives. And by that, I mean
yeah,
something other than a screen that I'm touching. And I don't know if that's
yeah,
because of my audience. I don't know if it's because we're all screen done. We're on screens all the time. We don't
Yeah.
need to do it. But I think it's probably because physical things drive more curiosity and pique our
Yeah.
interest more. And that's maybe why the physical
Yeah.
interactions make
Yeah.
it more interesting. But I think
Yeah.
kind of back to your question of where it makes us lazy, I think sometimes people
Yeah.
can go, I see this interactive company and I'm going to rent the X and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But really, as a
Yeah.
strategic event marketer, you have to think through, one, will my booth staff be able to manage that? But two, how does it tie to my overall key message? How am I driving
Yeah.
my message and my metrics with that interactive versus it being something separate?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And again, I think technology on its own, if you really think about the overarching exhibition experience, people buy from people, they want to interact with people. And when there is things like kiosks, okay, and the big shiny video screens and things like that, I think it's always important to actually have someone facilitating that experience with the technology, because people are really afraid to actually approach the machine and tap on, because they don't actually know what they're actually doing, right? And until you actually communicate with people to say to them, well, we've got this showcase, do you want to have a go, and show them how it actually works? And I think that's a trick that a lot of exhibitors are missing, because they get sold the idea of this technology is going to get lots and lots of engagement, but of course it can't do it on its own.
Right, right. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of people put some sort of, and a lot of times it's for their then measurement is collateral or literature. Like, what are people
Yeah.
self-sending to
Yeah.
them afterwards?
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
lot of them are
Yeah.
not getting the results that they expect from it. And I think exactly for the
Yeah.
reason you just made. It's not well staffed.
Yeah.
People don't know how to use it. And in a trade show environment, when I have 5,000 things competing for my attention, why would I pay
Yeah.
attention to your one screen that's asking me to do something that
Yeah.
I don't know what's
Yeah.
behind door number one, right? Like, I don't know what it's going to
Yeah.
ask me to do. So I think
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
a great point. That would be something that would be great to test. If you had a big enough booth, put one
Yeah.
unstaffed and one staffed. Well, then it might
Yeah.
be an expensive
Yeah.
test,
Yeah.
but it would be a really good way to prove the effectiveness of your staffer.
Absolutely. I think more research needs to be done in terms of how much difference do humans make in today's technology-led exhibition experiences, okay? In terms of if there was a situation where you could actually place one kiosk on its own and see how many people interacted with it, and then compare that with a kiosk that is manned by a human being, and see what the difference is in terms of the interaction rates and also in terms of the lead quality rates as well.
Yeah, and I mean, think about it in terms of you said before, people go to exhibitions to talk to people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can
Yeah.
do lots of things online. You can have a cool engagement online and I can do it. And when I do that, what happens? I naturally have a question. Like, think of all the bots that come up nowadays and how
Yeah.
frustrated you get because you're like, you're not answering my question. And so that's why
Yeah.
it's so important to have that person there, right? You might teach me something new
Yeah.
about your product, but I'm going to have a follow
Yeah.
up question that I need a real live person to give me that
Yeah.
information or the nuance for my company, right? Like I might have
Yeah.
a far off example that you have to address. So I think it's
Yeah.
critical. Even if it's
Yeah.
just for that building a relationship, people don't have relationships with company. They have relationships with people that represent that company. And that's why a lot of times you
Yeah.
see in industries, a salesperson leaves and then sometimes those people follow, right? Because
Yeah.
it's that
Yeah.
relationship.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so
Yeah.
important to make sure people are truly engaging and making people
Yeah.
feel special.
Absolutely. Okay. So in terms of just wrapping up the episode, the key standout qualities, I mean, is there one trait that is a definite no-no for a booth staffer that you would say, if this person has this quality, I'm not having them on the booth?
Okay, so what is the one no quality? I would say that I don't know if it's a personal characteristic, but just they can't have their screens out at all in the booth because I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest detractor is people
Yeah.
constantly pick up their phone to look at a text message or oh I just have to answer this. And if you're doing that, you're not doing your job in the booth.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to think, oh, well, it's not busy right now, or oh, well, it's not this. If there's not somebody there to cover for you, like I'm like, oh, hey,
Yeah.
Lee, I'm the greeter right now, and you're doing the demo. It's kind of quiet. I got to go take a call real quick. If I don't get you to cover for me, then that could fall
Yeah.
through the gaps. And it's one of those invisible losses. Once again, you don't even know you're losing that. So I would say you have to have a staffer that is willing to put the phone in the pocket, not get out the laptop, and really make sure they're fully present for the people that do stop
Yeah.
by.
All right. Okay. So let's flip it then. What is the top quality that you would look for?
Tenacity. And the reason I say that is, how are our staffers typically on day one at a trade show? They're
Yeah.
typically like bright eyed and bushy tailed and come into, you know what I mean? Like, people on day one are excited to greet the attendees.
Yeah.
And then how are they typically
Yeah.
on the last day of the show?
Yeah.
They're a little bit more, they're the wilted flower, right? And so I think it's really important that you, one, train your staff on,
Yeah.
hey, trade shows are hard. By the last day of the
Yeah.
show, your feet are going to hurt, you're going to be tired, your brain's going to hurt. But for the person that walks in on the last minute, on the last day of the show, you want them to have the same positive brand experience as the first person that
Yeah.
walked in on the first day of the show. And so you need somebody who's able to self motivate and take the measures to preserve their mental health and their physical health that will get them through that 3-day show or 5-day show, whatever it is. So that's what I meant by tenacity in that example.
Excellent. Yeah. We talk about energy, and I think that is a very undervalued personal skill set to actually have, is to be able to manage your energy levels on a consistent level throughout the duration of the show, because as you say, people do end up looking like wilted flowers by the end of the event. And I think the industry has a lot to answer for with that as well, because of all the networking events after the event, after the show floor, the late night drinking and everything else. It doesn't actually encourage that wholesome well-being kind of culture, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I also think, even though trade shows have tried to be healthier, like I've seen
Yeah.
bikes in, like you can self pedal to kind of zhuzh your energy. You've
Yeah.
seen kind of like maybe yoga, but I don't think the drive, like sometimes you just see it by
Yeah.
itself, right? It goes back to what you were talking about with
Yeah.
staffing. How are you using people
Yeah.
to bring others
Yeah.
into those types of
Okay.
interactions?
Great. So wrapping up the episode then, what is the number one tip you would give to a fellow event planner on building a high performance team so that it makes their jobs easier and make them look good in front of the finance director?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked before about picking the right person for the right role. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to skip that part of
Yeah.
it and say, if you
Yeah.
can't pick the right person for the right role, advertise the role first and the characteristics
Yeah.
for it of what you need, so that
Yeah.
then when people are
Yeah.
telling you who's coming to the show, you're kind of making the best decision together to make sure you
Yeah.
have people that align in those roles. Because otherwise, people come from
Yeah.
a different mindset, and then they're like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
just going to send just my sales team because this is a West Coast show and these are the people we need. So I think maybe
Yeah.
taking a reverse approach to it works really well.
That's a great point, and it's something that we haven't touched upon really. Would you actually have an application process from, if you run a large organization, for example, and you have lots of people to choose from, would you actually have a qualification process to actually choose the people, like an interview or a formal exercises they need to do to be able to submit to say, I'm the best booth staffer?
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. I haven't tried it before, only
Right.
typically because um, a lot of it tends to be regionally based with our sales team. But I do
Yeah.
think that if you have a very large booth, right, that would be a great
Yeah.
idea, because there's
Yeah.
always, a lot of times it's the more senior level people that get to go. Why not give
Yeah.
some of the junior people that opportunity to prove themselves? And by getting selected based on that criteria, they're naturally going to want to shine in that area, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one last question. Have you ever had the opportunity to kick a CEO's ass, whether they were being a nuisance on the booth?
I'm funny enough, I'm not an ass kicker. I'm a distractor. So I
Right.
will typically, if
Right.
they're in there, because a lot of times it's the executives, and I won't say this always because we I've had some great VPs of marketing. I've had some great VPs of sales who really are working with me and partnering with me to make sure they're so successful. But when I do have a detractor come in, they're pulling somebody out of the booth from their job. They're talking to
Yeah.
somebody because they don't have something else to do. I usually try to distract them and give them a job.
Right.
Hey, you know what I
All
need
right.
you to do? I need you to come over here and help greet this person. Or I have a VIP over here. Or, hey, can you walk around and give a reward to the 5 people you see doing the best staffing job, right? So
Yeah.
by giving
Yeah.
them a job to do, it tends to make it all work better versus
Confrontation.
I'd rather detract than fight for me.
Okay. Great advice. Great advice there, Deanna. So where can people find you?
LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't post all the time, but I do respond to all my messages on there. I do teach online
Okay.
training classes, but I usually promote those to people that have connected with me on LinkedIn or some other way so that if they're interested in doing some sort of training class or learning about what's coming up, and that's where we talk about, I'll promote, hey, I'm talking with Lee at Exhibitor Live or other speaking events I'm doing. So that's really the best way to connect with me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Deanna, for your time. It was a pleasure to discuss all things staffing. And I shall hopefully see you on the show floor very soon.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was fun to chat with you.
And there you have it. That wraps up another episode of the Expo Factor. A huge thanks to Deanna for sharing her wisdom and practical strategies to help exhibit planners build high performance booth teams. For me, there were 3 key takeaways that stood out from this episode. Number 1, great teams aren't just chosen, they're actually coached, trained, and aligned to perform. Number 2, small booths can actually deliver big ROI if you get the people piece spot on. And number 3, real-time feedback and emotional intelligence are your secret weapons for on-site success. So, if you're an exhibit planner, marketing leader looking to elevate your booth game, rewind this episode and take notes. You actually want to apply these tips for your next shows. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and connect with us using hashtag the Expo Factor. Until the next time, keep putting people at the heart of your exhibitions. They can make a huge difference. Until the next time, goodbye.